I'm Brady Berserker from Super Geeky Playdate, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network. Just like the show you're listening to now, the opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to episode 92 of Better Podcasting. On today's show, we talk about how to craft a review of a podcast.
In this week's Better Podcasting download, we've got a double shot with some information on an important recent legal ruling, and of course, SoundCloud information.
In this week's Better Pod Back, we hear from some of our great listeners.
And finally, we're going to introduce a special Better Podcasting contributor. Lauren, start the show now.
Welcome to Better Podcasting, a show where we talk about podcast tips, tools, and best practices to help you succeed with your podcast. What makes us different? Well, just like you, we podcast purely out of the love and fun of it. Podcasting is our hobby, and we recognize that it's yours too. We always encourage your questions and feedback, and you can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. Here's your host for the show, Stephen John Drew and Stargate Pioneer.
Hello and welcome to episode number 92 of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen John Drew, and with me, of course, is the wonderful Stargate Pioneer.
There are just some weeks that you're just more revved up to be in the seat and talk about podcasting than others. This is one because of the day I've had. I don't want to talk about it. I just want to talk about podcasting, which is a great thing because we have one heck of a packed show and a great show for you tonight. I'm really excited about episode 92 here, Stephen.
As opposed to the previous 91 episodes.
Well, you know, I'm partial to episode 50. I think that was the best of our previous episodes. You are partial to episode 65, and the listeners have spoken, so you are right and I am wrong.
All right, so let's just go ahead and dive right into it today. We are here to talk about the latest in the hobby podcasting world. Okay, maybe it's not the latest, but we're going to give you some tips and tools if you are a hobby podcaster, and we are going to also tell you about the latest happenings in the world of podcasting. Now, you might be saying to yourself, Stephen, Stargate Pioneer, I'm a little tired of your voice, and every now and then I just like to hear a third voice come in and just show you who's boss and show you how things should be really done. Well, guess what? If you are saying that to yourself, you're in luck because today we are officially debuting our first guest contributor segment from none other than, wait for it,
Emily Prokop from The Story Behind.
That's right. Emily has gone ahead and done us a little bit of a contributor segment. And what this is this is going to be an article that you can find on the Gonna Geek website. You can find that at geeks.link/Emily review. That's www.geeks.link/Emily review. And it is a awesome microphone comparison. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying, Stephen, wait, you have done many microphone comparisons. How is this one different? Well, guess what? Emily is going to show you some interesting microphones that you might not have considered because she has herself a brand new Zoom H5. Isn't that right, Stargate Pioneer?
That's right. And the Zoom H5 comes with an XY microphone. She's got an iPhone. So guess what? She has Apple earbuds. And of course, we know she has that wonderful ATR 2100. So she gets to explore using an H5, a Zoom H5 as a hobby podcaster, and different starting microphones that you might have laying around in different situations. So this is going to be great. She does an audio segment. It's going to be available at geeks.link/Emily review as well as the article. So go check that out. And it is going to be fun. Hopefully, we're going to have Emily back as a special contributor again soon.
Now, one of the things that I want to say that's really neat about this audio clip, we're only going to play a section of it, but we encourage you to check out the whole thing because what she does is she goes to a bunch of different locations. It's amazing because we've talked about it before. Microphones sound so different when you are in different spots. For example, when I find myself in the middle of an ice rink, I got to get that microphone nice and close to me, turn down the gain, and kind of whisper into it. But when I am recording in a big padded room, I can yell as much as I want, and they do often find me in a padded room.
I was gonna say you're more found in a padded room than an ice rink. I, on the other hand, am more found in an ice rink than a padded room. So yeah, here, check this clip out. And if you like what you hear, make sure you go check out her review. So Steven, you ready to roll the clip?
Let's roll it.
All right, so I am in probably my favorite place to record that I haven't ever recorded in, but I'm in my car and I'm talking on the Apple earbuds right now. And what's great is my car is very soundproof. I have a window unit for my air conditioning going about 10 feet away, and you can't hear a thing. The problem is, it's July, and I didn't think ahead to cool down the car before I did this. So this is the first recording I'm making, and I need a break before trying the other microphones. All right, here I am on the ATR 2100 inside my car, which I think sounds the best. You know what? I'll have to see when I listen to all the recordings and I hear how the Apple earbuds sound, but I really think this sounds the best. Just the ATR 2100 into the H5 with the doors closed. Again, it's really hot, and after about 5 seconds, I'm already sweating. So this might not be the best thing to do when it's winter or summer, wherever you are, and it's inclement weather, but you could do a quick podcast if you cool down the car and quickly say everything you need to say. I don't think I would be able to do my podcast in here, though. All right, so I'm on the XY microphone on the Zoom H5, and I'm inside my car, which is also very quiet. There's actually a plane going. Oh, there's my keys. There's actually a plane going over my head. I don't know if you can hear it. But again, inside my car, as soon as I closed that door, I couldn't hear the window unit of my air conditioning, and it's also very hot.
Awesome. That is, I love that so much. You really got to check the rest of that out, because you're probably saying to yourself, Steven, they actually don't sound that different as far as reverb goes. You know, we always hear about how you got to have the right mic to pick it to make sure that you don't have echo. Well, listen to the rest of the clip, because you will hear this environment definitely affects these microphones very drastically.
If there's any sort of weather going on around you, like rain, you can definitely hear that in the car, and you're not going to be able to record in the car. But that was a great example, great situation. And another great example of what Emily is doing here as a microphone review is using a female voice. We've had tons of comments of people, voiceover artists and podcasters like, I want to hear what the microphone sounds through a female voice. Well, guess what? Emily has a female voice, a great female voice, which you can find at the Story Behind podcast at thestorybehind.com. And hopefully we will be hearing more microphone reviews from Emily in the future.
Which, by the way, I just want to say that we did plan to tackle that side of reviews, but unfortunately, SP and I never got together, because what he was going to do was kick me somewhere, and then I was going to record a review, but that just didn't work out.
That's still on the table, Steven. I can't wait to try that.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. Here we go. This week, we've got a fun segment for you. We're going to talk about review best practices. Now, this is a hot topic within the podcast world, because a lot of people like to talk about reviews and whatnot, but you are a podcaster who likely also listens to podcasts, and sometimes you're feeling the itch to review. And so what we want to do today is talk about some best practices, primarily if you're going to be leaving a review. Now, here's the thing that you want to remember with this. If you take a lot of what we talk about and listen to sort of the basis behind it, you can apply that to soliciting feedback for your own show as well. When you are asking people to review your show and give you information, This will hopefully help hone in a little bit on what will help your show become the best, right, Stargate Pioneer?
Definitely. Whether you produce a podcast or you're just an avid fan of podcasting and a listener of podcasts, odds are you have a favorite show. And I'd venture to say that most people that do podcasts started after listening to podcasts. So undoubtedly they like podcasting more than just their own show. And maybe you're a student of podcasting, like I was kind of, sort of. I wanted to know all the behind the scenes stuff of movies and TV shows, which is probably why I do entertainment based podcast shows right now. So reviews are a way to give back to a show, and you can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Used to be called iTunes. I think it still is called iTunes, even though they made the change to Apple Podcasts at WWDC. I still see iTunes everywhere. Or you could leave a review on a show on Stitcher or your podcatcher of choice like Overcast or Google Play Music. But rarely have I seen or listened to a review on how to construct a good review. So we're going to run down some better practices to help you write reviews. The first best practice that I will tell you is to make sure that you're honest in your review. Yeah, you have to be honest. You can't just make up stuff, because if you make up stuff, people are going to be like, oh, this isn't helpful at all. And if you go back to like Amazon.com reviews, you will see in there reviews if they're helpful or not. There's a difference, though. In Amazon, you're actually purchasing something. So keep that in mind, that you're really being brutally honest on Amazon.com, because you're trying to recommend if somebody's going to spend money on something or not. Whereas podcasts are for free. Yes, some people have their back catalog behind a paywall, but for the most part, the recent episodes are free and they're giving it away for free. So you have to treat the reviews a little differently and not be as scathing. So a key in producing your review is to make sure they're in a public place where people can see it. But I wouldn't just place it on social media, because people aren't looking for reviews of podcasts on social media. They're not necessarily looking for the review on Facebook, on Twitter, in those places. They're looking at the places where you can actually consume the podcast. So I would limit my reviews that I would give to the podcatchers. And everybody says iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Yes, I that is the main place, but there are other distribution places like Stitcher, stuff like that. So podcasters crave feedback. We really do. And one way that you can give feedback is through the reviews. But remember that if you're giving a negative review, give the podcaster a chance to improve first. Don't give that 1-star scathing review unless they really deserve it. And they really can't even have a chance of improving unless you message them privately and then give them a chance to improve. And then you can give the scathing review if they don't improve. But if they do improve, then that 1-star review is there forever. And then you're stuck with a bad review on a show that's turned out to be pretty good, right, Steven?
Yeah. Now, of course, there's always exceptions to the rule. For example, some people actually thrive on 1-star reviews. That's kind of their deal that they do. And maybe the show's just so offensive that that's good for business. So, you know, there's always exceptions to the rules. But the bottom line is that if you are going to be trying to help a fellow podcaster out, let's try to throw them a bone first and let them try to address the situation. Now, another good practice, and this is one that you're going to want to turn up your iPod to right now, and it's going to be mind-blowing to you, but it's don't review your show. Don't review your own show, because that's something that we see a lot of people do. And honestly, you think that you're being secret, but you can tell. There's a lot of times with the lingo as well. Maybe you just use an account that's pretty obviously yours. This actually recently happened to Stargate Pioneer, where he went and wrote a review on a show, and he liked the show. And then as he was scrolling through the reviews, he goes, oh, I can obviously tell that this is one of the hosts. And it burned you, right, SP?
Yeah, it just gave me a bad taste in my mouth. Don't review your own show, because that gives the perception that you are a listener of the show, and you're not. You're actually one of the producers of the show. yes, it's within the rules that you can go. I could go right now and give a review of Better Podcasting or Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. or Starling Tribune or Gonna Geek. I'm not going to do that because I'm actually involved in the production of the show. If at any point in time in the future, if I sell my 95% stake in Better Podcasting to somebody else.
95%? Let's
I'm sorry, it's 97%. I was being generous to you right now. So, okay. If I sell my 95% in Better Podcasting, give it to somebody else, and Steven does the show with somebody else that eventually takes over the show, so Steven's not involved anymore either, I'll go ahead and leave a review of the show if I still like it. So that is just, it just leaves a sour taste in my mouth. It's like you're playing the game rather than seeking good reviews. So it's a pet peeve of mine, I guess. So don't review your own show because people like me will see it and go, okay, so when should you not review a show as well? If you haven't listened to a show, don't review a show just based on, oh, this is cool, or it's my friend and this is great. No. Listen to not one show, not two shows, but at least 3 shows or more before you leave a review, because you never know if you're picking like a bad show, just an individual episode, because a podcast is more than one episode. It's a whole season or it's an entire run. So don't give the perception that you're leaving a review on the entirety of the show based on one episode, or worse yet, no episodes. That's another pet peeve of mine. So make sure you listen to at least 3 episodes.
And the other thing that you probably want to consider as well is being specific with the details on the review, because it's one thing to come in and be like, Stargate Pioneer, this is the best show ever because it's awesome. That doesn't really tell a potential listener or something. So, actually crafting it a little bit and being like, hey, these guys have something really great to say about how to watch paint dry. They've got all the techniques in the world. They'll talk about the different environment, the way that the different music affects the paint drying. They're really good. So you want to be specific. Otherwise, just the best show ever is pretty useless. It's kind of like back in the eBay days when you'd go and you'd look at a seller and it would say quick prompt sale A+++++. It's like, okay, that's on everybody's profile. That tells me nothing.
I actually have purchased some things from eBay recently, and unfortunately that rule is still in effect because you only get something ridiculously low, like 60 characters to leave your review on the seller. So that's all you see is A++. They're not really interested in the verbiage in there. Like if you have something negative to say, all you can do is leave a "don't use this seller ever. I had a bad experience." And then you rate the seller very poorly.
It's kind of like people with my podcast where they're like, don't listen to this podcast.
Pretty much, yeah. Any podcast that you're part of, except for this one, because I own 95% of the podcast. Yeah. Another issue with podcast reviews is review swaps. And this is something that a lot of people have an issue with for a lot of different reasons. I do have an issue with it. Why do I have an issue with it? Because of the aforementioned listen to the show. Make sure you're a fan of the show before you actually leave a public review in which you're saying how good the show is not. So a review swap really helps no one, because oftentimes the reviewers just sampled the show at best, or worse yet, they haven't listened to the show and they're just leaving a 5-star positive review. And I know a lot of people actually pay for reviews too, because you see a bunch of reviews in there as well. Don't do that. Don't go and pay for somebody to review your show. As a podcaster, don't do that. And if you're an individual trying to make money, don't take money for reviewing somebody's show. It really helps no one. It's easy to spot. It lacks substance. There's no specifics. Like we were talking about, make sure there's 2 to 3 specifics in your review. You won't see any specifics in there. And if you see multiple non-substantive reviews for a show, I won't listen to that show, because obviously somebody has gone into that show and done review swaps or paid for reviews. If you're stooping to the level, if you're trying so hard that you're stooping to the level of doing a podcast review swap, it just reminds me of a used car salesman, or worse yet, and this is something I've rediscovered recently, a furniture salesman. Oh my gosh, just let me look at the furniture. Just leave me alone. I'll look at it and see what there is, and if I need help, I'll get to it. But don't accost me at the door and do that. So these review swaps remind me of that sort of personality. All right. So, Stephen, do you have a furniture salesman story to tell?
Oh, I could tell you tons of salesman stories, but I'll just leave them alone because they're all the same, where you just are like, okay, yeah, you're going to tell me that this thing that I just started looking at is the greatest thing in the world, aside from the thing that I'm about to go look at.
Right. So, getting back to the podcast reviews, the podcast swap request to me will go ignored. I simply won't respond to you. I played with this throughout my years of podcasting because people have come up to me in different podcasting communities back when I was on Facebook or even on Reddit, and they'll say, hey, review my show and I'll review yours. No thanks. I'll just ignore it and move on with my life. Subscribers and people that downloads your podcast, that's what matters. It's not podcast reviews. So, and talking about that, there's nothing to podcast reviews and new and noteworthy in iTunes, by the way. No. It's based on subscriptions and downloads. It's not on reviews. So while reviews do help the podcaster feel good, and if you are looking at a comparable show to listen to, let's say you got 2 or 3, and one has 1 billion amazing reviews that are substantive, yeah, I'll go check that show out. I might not ignore this other show and compare them myself, but if I see no reviews for a 3rd or 4th show, I'm like, I'll go with where the experts are. I'll go over here instead. So that's just my opinion on what reviews actually do. So other best practices of what actually to put in reviews, you can qualify the host's experience. So are they experts in the field, in the subject of the show? Are they just learning themselves? Because there's learning journey podcasts out there. That's fine. Have they won any awards? That would be interesting to put in there, saying they're experts in this, or they did such a great job on the production that they've won awards. And do they have past podcasting experience? Like, these guys have been podcasting for 10 years and it definitely shows. That would be great to actually throw in the review. If the production of the show is outstanding to you as a listener, throw it in there. And what do I mean by production value? I mean, like, is it well researched? Does it sound like a professional show? Is the background music selection outstanding? That sort of thing should go in there as well. And I don't necessarily know if the background music actually matters, but some people it does. Some people does. And then what has the show meant to you? Like, is there amazing, actionable information? Has it been extremely helpful for your show? Has the show saved your life? From a health standpoint, a safety standpoint, like, oh, don't go do that. You'll electrocute yourself if you put the red wire to the black wire and then throw them together. Yeah, that's not going to be good. So don't do that. And you're like, oh, this show saved my life. It told me not to do that. Or maybe it's your emotional well-being. Is it a public service? That would be interesting to note. Or did it change your life? Did it help you get a job? Did it inform you of an opportunity? Have you found a new hobby or an event or an activity because of it? That would be great specifics to throw in the review. So another best practice specific to throw in the show is, who would you recommend this show to? So I'll take Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., for example. If you are a fan of Marvel, you would like Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast. If you're a fan of whatever, X, you would like this podcast. If you're a parent of a teen and you're talking about raising teens, yes, this podcast would be applicable to there. If you are a salesman and you are looking for the great tips and tricks on how to sell furniture better, this podcast would apply to you. Don't accost your customers when they walk in the door. Would be my step number 1 for that show. And then, who are you to the show? Are you a longtime listener? Are you an industry or a topic expert? Are you just interested in the topic? Those sorts of things would be great specifics as best practices to throw into the review. Now, Stephen, you actually have a lot to say about if a podcaster is soliciting a review.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to take a lot of what we just discussed and apply it to your requests for reviews, because you might think that you just want to get a bunch of 5-star reviews and that's what you want to have. And then you just want the maximum amount of 5-star reviews. Well, ultimately, though, that's not going to help you develop your show. It might make you look on first glance kind of good, but again, a lot of people are going to see through this. So if you are wanting to be, as a podcaster, requesting reviews, Here's the key that you want to remember is it's all about how to do it effectively. You don't want to be that salesperson and mention it at the beginning and then halfway through the show and then at the end. You don't want to do that. No, that's not really ideal. And as a listener, that gets draining. Maybe you want to tag it at the beginning of your show where if you've got an intro, you might want to work it in there really casually, or at the end. Now, keep in mind that at the end, a lot of times people have checked out by then. There's a lot of studies for that. Also, maybe if there's a certain segment you're trying out, let's say you're a show that you are trying out a brand new segment. You go, okay, we want to know, what did you think of that? Do you want that to come back? You can work it in that way as well. You might even go ahead and, if you have show notes on your website, put a little tag in there that entices people who are already reading these notes to leave you a review because they're already on your site. Maybe it's just a couple of strokes extra for them. So really the placement is huge. And if you overdo it, it's going to come off as that salesperson, as SP said. The other thing that you might want to do is apply that whole be specific element because, again, getting a 5-star review doesn't tell you anything as far as how you want to enhance and make your show better. If you ask for something specific, that will help you with that. So you might say, we want to know, what do you think of the length of our show? Let us know. Or what do you think? Would you like a certain segment being a little bit longer? So you want to really entice and encourage people to think about that substance because now that you've listened to this, you know all of the value that is the substance, but your reviewer does not. So you want to make sure that you do try to direct people towards that. The other thing that I want to mention here is that you need to remember that your audience is more than just one consumer base. Now, this is something that I see beginner podcasters make the mistake of all the time. They go and what they end up doing is they end up saying, write us in iTunes. They go, write us in iTunes. That's what we want. Well, guess what? Hey, I'm a listener to podcasts and I do not use iTunes. So that's useless to me. So you might want to think about where else people might be able to write you a review. For example, we have a video show here. If you want to like our video show, you could go and you can comment on our video show to share your love. Or, your distaste for me. That's possible too. So you can go ahead and comment there. The other thing as well is the type of consumer. I was talking about the beginning podcasters making the mistake. I see endless amount of people go over towards a podcast help group on Facebook and they ask for people to go and review their show. Well, guess what? You are talking to podcasters. They may not be your target audience. If you're doing a show about paint drying, you're going to want to make sure you're asking for advice from people who are watching paint dry. If that's their hobby, those are the people you want to know, because I can tell you what, Stargate Pioneer, he doesn't share the same love of paint drying that you and I do. I know that you do. I enjoy it too. And he's going to go and he's going to be like, sorry, your content sucks.
I will say, why are you wasting my time? Basically, yes, because I don't have time to watch paint dry.
No, and so you want to make sure that, and that's a joke, by the way, but you want to make sure, though, that you are asking people who care about your content about it, because podcasters are generally picky. And so they're probably going to go and everybody's going to give you the same technical advice. A lot of people who have been doing this a long time are probably, you're going to see the big trends within these reviews, and they're going to tell you how to technically make your podcast better, but that's not going to help with your content development. So you want to make sure you're asking for advice from the appropriate people. And sometimes those podcast groups are not the best place to do it. Sometimes you will get better advice as far as reviews go from a friend who has never podcasted in their life. So you want to remember that. And also, what you want to make sure that you are doing is remembering that reviews are not the best way to get eyes on your show. They may help people who are potentially watching this show, looking at on a listing somewhere. But if you are ultimately trying to get more eyes onto your program, reviews are not going to help you with that, contrary to what people will have you believe. They will encourage people to maybe check out the show, but there are much better ways that you can spend your time if you're just wanting to get new eyes on your show.
And as we end this segment, I just want to say, have you given your favorite show a review lately? If you haven't, go do it. Use these best practices. Write a draft before you do it and get them the review that they deserve if you like their content. If you have given a show review and you have not used these best practices, most places, most podcatchers will allow you to go back and edit the review as the reviewer. So go ahead and edit the review and make sure that it has the specifics in there, all the best practices that we talked about, and just put it to test and give the show that you like a positive review to make sure that other people can check it out and that the show can actually grow and continue in some cases. So it does serve that minor purpose.
For sure. Well, if you have some practices you want to share with us, or if you just want to say what you find is most effective for yourself when you're reading reviews, please get in touch with us. You can reach us at BetterPod. You can find us at facebook.com/betterpodcasting or send an email to podcast@betterpodcasting.com. If you send us an email, we would love it if you sent us an audio or video clip, because remember, we are a video show as well, and you can find that at youtube.com/GonnaGeek, and you can comment there about our show. Boom.
Welcome to this week's Better Podcasting Download.
All right, let's start off with the, might as well just get a bump for that. Say it's SoundCloud time. That was my SoundCloud bump that I made up.
SoundCloud. Okay. Yeah, SoundCloud found its way into the news yet again this past week because there's a possible financial save to the company. So AmSauce posted an article outlining a possible SoundCloud save because of investors. So it's the Rain Group and a Singapore state investment company called Temasek, I believe, Holdings, will each acquire stakes in SoundCloud. Those combined stakes from the two big companies will jointly amount to more than 50% of the SoundCloud equity. The two investments from both the Rain Group and Temasek Holdings will total to about $300 million. So that's what they're saying that SoundCloud is worth. And if it's 50%, that's like $600 million, which I think is a little bit overinflated, but it does have potential in the music industry. So some people saw this article and they started spreading it like wildfire, like it was the ultimate, everything is good with SoundCloud. And it might be for the music point side of things, but as the article points out, although this is good news, the deal hasn't gone through its completion yet. There are still things that need to be addressed as far as that goes. So there's conditions that need to be met. The other question, Stephen, the one that we've talked about many times, is what will the investors want to do to make SoundCloud more profitable?
Yeah, and that's ultimately going to be the answer to the question of, is there a future with podcasters and SoundCloud? Because you may be a podcaster and you might be familiar with all of the places and the nooks and crannies of podcasting on SoundCloud, but SoundCloud has been based on the music industry a lot earlier than it was podcasting. And we've also seen many media host providers talk about how expensive it is to be a media host for podcasting. And so the question ultimately comes down to is, will SoundCloud want to continue barking up that tree if they're saved? That's still the big if they're saved, because remember, your podcast probably runs, I don't know, I'm not going to say probably, but there are lots of podcasts that run somewhere between half hour and an hour or more. And I'll remind you that a song is about 2 to 4 minutes usually. So there's a gross difference there with the amount of content being hosted of a podcast versus a song. And the thing that you really, really, really want to be cautious of right now is that if these investors are coming in, and this is my opinion, by the way, this is my random Steven speculation. I am not a financial advisor. Don't take this as anything else. My opinion is if these investors are coming in and they're wanting to make the change to shape it back towards the music industry, are they going to want to keep the upkeep of podcasting? So it's a question that we don't know. We won't know until one day that things happen with SoundCloud and we have actual decisions on this, but it's just another set of considerations for those right now who might be with SoundCloud or might be considering SoundCloud. So just keep that in mind. We just want to keep you the latest update. I know we've talked a lot about SoundCloud, but the reality is it's very important information for you as a hobbyist who has limited budget that you're looking to invest into your podcast.
But Steven, as a music listener, what if the only song I listen to is We Are the World?
We are the world. Okay, I can't do that because we're on YouTube content,
Exactly. And that's a 7-minute, 14-second song, right?
That's true.
One of the longest songs I know. American Pie is probably about 10, 12 minutes. But that's it. They're not half-hour shows. So that's just enunciating the point there, Steven.
Thanks. Now I want to listen to We Are the World. I really appreciate that. Next piece of news that we've got for you in the Better Podcasting Download is about trolls. So let's turn it over to our resident troll, Stargate Pioneer.
Internet troll Stargate Pioneer. Yeah, that's great. Mm-hmm. All right,
I'm joking.
to the rescue.
He is not the troll. He is not a troll.
Well, I'll talk about the podcast patent troll here. So on Monday, just a couple of days ago, on the 7th of August, 2017, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit affirmed the April 2015 Inter Partes Review IPR ruling, a process that allows anyone to challenge a patent's validity at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So back in 2013, Personal Audio, who is the patent troll, began sending legal demand letters to numerous podcasters and companies like Samsung in an apparent attempt to cajole them into a licensing deal lest they be slapped with a lawsuit. Some of those efforts were successful, such as in August 2014, Adam Carolla, who had raised about $500,000 as part of a possible legal defensive fund. So Carolla, by the way, settled with Personal Audio, but it's unclear. I haven't seen any disclosure about how much money changed hands, if any, for that matter. So as Personal Audio began to gain more public attention, remind you, this is back to 2013. This has been in the podcasting news ever since then. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, EFF, however, stepped in and said that it would challenge Personal Audio's U.S. patent number 8,112,504, which describes a, quote, system for disseminating media content representing episodes in a serialized sequence, unquote. In the end, the Electronic Frontier Foundation raised over $76,000, more than double its initial target. Now, this is important. The EFF won the initial ruling in April 2015 thanks to 2 instances of prior art. The digital rights organization cited 1, the CBC's, yes, Canadian Broadcast Company's, long-standing science show Quirks and Quarks, and CNN's Internet Newsroom as examples of technology dating back before the patent's 1996 date.
Yeah, now this is really interesting because this has actually gone now to 2 levels of courts. And so the question is, a lot of people are pitching this as this is done. But there is still within the legal tree, to my understanding, there's still further that this can go. So this might not be done yet, but this is good that 2 courts so far have ruled things the same way. It's not to say that if it was escalated further, it wouldn't go another way. There's lots of cases out there which have shown that, and there's reason that there is an appeal process. But I hope that it just left alone at this point here. But I guess it depends on how much they think that they have a chance of this. I personally am slightly worried about the settlement, on why there was the settlement earlier. But, I guess when you got a large pocketbook, sometimes you just do it so you can just move on. So I don't know.
There's two things at play here. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV, but here's what I know about law. First of all, there's legal precedent. So you'd have to go back and look at all the legal precedents of anything regarding this. And those have actually already probably been argued. And that gets to my second point. When you actually appeal on a ruling, you're not introducing any new evidence. You're simply looking at the process and the existing evidence that were brought in and what it means. So the appeals don't actually appeal the substance of the case, although that's the point of the appeal. They actually are appealing the legal process by most occasions. So it really goes back to, was that initial trial and were the subsequent appeals done properly and with due diligence, and who knows what is actually going to come out if there is an additional appeal and if this does eventually go to the Supreme Court. Because this is the other thing that I do know about the U.S. Supreme Court, is that even if there is an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court does not necessarily have to hear said appeal. And thus, the former ruling by the district court actually stands in legal precedent. So those are just some things to keep in your mind in case you didn't know anything about the U.S. legal process and were interested to know, say you live in New Zealand and you don't understand how this is going to affect you. How this would affect you if this patent troll actually went through is it could affect the infrastructure and the business behind podcasting. Also, as an individual podcaster, you might owe some process or royalties to the podcast patent troll every time you submit an episode, maybe if you have a feed that's current, those sorts of things. So this could affect people outside the United States if you're using infrastructure that is based in the United States.
So the bottom line with this is that you can thank us Canadians, because you know what? It's a huge citation that has helped twice. And again, dating back to 1996, I remember Windows 95 was really the era that internet media took off. So that's pretty good. Us Canadians, for once, we were ahead of the curve.
I'm surprised you were born in 1996, Stephen.
Well, you know what? If I could have it my way, I would have been born 10 years earlier than I was, because let's be honest, the 80s is kind of crappy.
I don't know. Somebody that lived through them, they were okay. It's Back to the Future, baby. Back to the future.
That's true. All right. Well, there you go. Now you're all up to date on the world of podcasting. Let's find out, though, what you had to say about your podcast this week. We asked a poll. This was an exciting poll. We said, if you make a podcast, did you listen to podcasts before you started? So somebody aside from myself went on to the Better Podcasting account and asked that question in that exact wording.
That individual may or may not have been suffering from DMV, post-traumatic stress syndrome or something like that. So yes, the essence of the poll is, did you listen to podcasts before you started? There was two answers. Yes, I listened before I started my podcasts, or no, I didn't listen before. And surprisingly, there were a couple of people that said no, they did not listen before they started podcasting. But the large majority, 88%, said yes, they listened before, which was pretty much what I was thinking. This is an unscientific poll, and we just did it today. Like I said, I was in DMV, PSTD, but so there you go.
That's a good question, and I'm not surprised with the results. I've been podcasting since 2008, and I gotta say, like, you know, if I was to answer this, I would actually say I lean towards the no. I'm sure I listened to a podcast or two before. I'm sure I must have, but I came from the internet stream section, so it was kind of just a natural progression for myself. And I can't think of any shows that I listened to before I podcasted. I remember listening to shows that my brother brought to my attention, comparing my podcast to them, but that was after I started. So I would lean more towards the no.
I could see that. The original OG podcasters from the 2004 to 2007 timeframe, yeah, I can totally see that. But once you get into 2008 and 2009, I would say the large majority of people that started podcasting back then actually had heard of or heard a podcast before they started. So yeah, we're in this delicate balance where we still have original people in the pod space that didn't know what a podcast was before they started. So yeah, I'll hand you that. Yeah, that would be good as well. That should have been a third option there as well.
We also had Win Kelly Charles say, thank you for your podcast. That really helped me today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Win. And if you have any questions about podcasting, just go ahead and reach out to us and we'll throw them in the show.
I'm going to actually go ahead and turn it over, though, to Stargate Pioneer to read this next one because it's pretty awesome.
It was awesome indeed last week, and you've been gloating about it ever since. So Ryle Davis Jr. at R. Davis Jr. 12078 said, at Stephen Jondra, love the Red Hot Chili Pepper reference in Better Pod episode 91.
I'm going to quit the show now on that high note. There's nowhere more for me to go from there.
Exactly. I just want to say, in addition to the Red Hot Chili Pepper reference, we did get a note from Chris Long saying, woohoo, I won. Yeah, here's my address. So we will get that microphone out to him as soon as we can. And oh, by the way, Stephen, we talked about podcast reviews today, didn't we?
Did we?
In the second segment. Can't say it's first segment because we had Emily in the first segment. So second segment, our main segment, we talked about best practices of how to review a podcast. Well, guess what? Over on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whichever one you want to call it, on July 27th, there was a review for Better Podcasting. Yes, must listen for anyone who does a podcast by Floppity Ha. This is the most organized, thorough, and most importantly, unbiased podcast about podcasting you can find. It blows the competition out of the water, as all the other, quote, here's how to podcast, unquote, shows are either sponsored by a major company or are blatantly trying to sell something. They've even broken news stories, like the one about Google indexing RSS feeds, that have impacted the entire podcasting landscape. 100% the best and most underrated podcast out there.
That's awesome. I love it. Thank you so much for that review. And there's a lot of really good specifics in there. So, hey, didn't even need our advice.
Oh, and I wish I would know Floppity Ha's podcast website if he or she had one, and I would definitely cite where to go listen to their show. So that's just a little tip. By the way, for if you're going to leave a review for Better Podcasting, we're going to read it on the show. Go ahead and leave your contact information or your show title or some indication of who you are so we can give your show a little promotion.
And finally, one last thing that I'll mention. We got an email last week after our show from Johnny Pennington, and Johnny emailed saying, I haven't quite figured out myself who SP resembles, although I'm quite sure it's not Tom Hanks or Bill Murray.
Oh, boo hiss.
If I was going to try to figure it out myself, I'd probably do my research into looking at a father figure or a mom and pop store proprietor, character, actor in a 1950s or 1960s television series. A good starting point probably would be The Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits. Yep, that's where I'd start. Good day, mate. Oops, not Canadian. Johnny Pennington.
Having a little bit of trouble identifying his language. Well, you know, there was that one show, The Little House on the Prairie, right? What was the shop owner's name?
I don't know.
I can't remember. I mean, he's got a thinner face than me, so we can't go with that. But yeah, a dad role, yeah, like Leave It to Beaver. I could, yeah, okay.
But that is going to take us to the end of the show. Thanks to everybody who came on by the live chat room at www.geeks.live. We had a whole bunch tonight, including Mike JPEG Tara. We had Seth, Emily, Heather, Bandrew, and Dave. So a lot of people and some others that were popping in and out, and a couple of gems to entice you to come check us live on Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific. That's 8 p.m. Eastern time. We had Mike say paint drying. Heck no. I'm starting one about new accounting pronouncements and how they impact you.
How they don't impact you.
Sorry, how they don't impact you. We also had Bandrew say the following: Steven, you're the best podcast host ever, Everyone loves you. Oh, thank you, Bandrew.
Only the people that like energetic podcast hosts.
We also had Emily say, I like when podcasters ask for feedback rather than a review, so I know if I email them, there's a chance they'll email me back. And I always get starstruck. Haha. And finally, in regards to SP the Troll, we had another comment from Mike. He says, he just plays one on Facebook.
Sure. If I had a Facebook account, I definitely will. You know what cracks me up about that is Facebook still emails me. So if somebody posts something in a group that I had joined in Facebook, I still get those notifications. So that's just crazy.
They want you back. So thanks to everybody who came on by Geeks.live, and we hope that we'll see you there next week. Again, that is 8:00 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays. Before we do go, though, I just want to remind everybody that we're part of the Gonna Geek Network, and also on the Gonna Geek Network is our latest edition, the Undaunted Podcast. If you like geeky stuff, please check out Undaunted as well as other geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. Now, if you just are wanting to have more in-person geekery, the thing that you want to do aside from stalking Stargate Pioneer, because really that's going to get you a restraining order, is check out Stargate Pioneer when he is talking at a convention.
Yeah, we've had pretty much success over convention panels the last couple of years, and we've got another one coming up Saturday, the August 19th at Gen Con. It's the 50th Gen Con, by the way, in Indianapolis, Indiana, at 10 a.m. on Saturday, the 19th of August. We will have a panel at the Crown Plaza. The room is Pennsylvania Station C. The title is, What is a Podcast? It's a miserable little pile of secrets. And then directly following that at 11 a.m. in the same room, we will have a panel titled Purposeful Podcasting with the Gonna Geek Network. That's going to be with me. That's going to be with my co-host on Starling Jaboon, Michelle. That's going to be with the verified Cody Gaw. He's also a Chicago-based WGN radio personality, by the way, and the host of the new professional podcast, Curiosity.com. He also is a GonnaGeek.com host from the Game Life Balance US podcast, and then his co-host, Jonathan Martin from Game Life Balance US, will be there. We will be the panel members. We will take your questions. We would love to meet you and shake your hand. So come find us at Gen Con at the 19th of August at 10 a.m. and 11 a.m.
So make sure you do that and don't stalk Stargate Pioneer otherwise.
No, because I do have a security system.
Awesome. Well, that is going to take us to the end of the show. So for episode number 92 of Better Podcasting, I am Stephen John Drew. Compress me now.
And I'm SP. We'll see you at Gen Con.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Better Podcasting. We want to hear from you. You can find all of our contact information at betterpodcasting.com. If you like the show, please consider giving us a 5-star review in iTunes. We encourage you to check out all of the other geeky podcasts available at GonnaGeekNetwork.com. This has been a Gonna Geek production. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.